The werewolf stalks Germany's Bamberg Forest, and Noah Weber's Lost Tape proves it. I invite you to join me in this Lost Tapes episode, where we explore the demise of Noah Weber, a middle-aged man whose best moments in life were behind him. I am Michael Bearre, your host for this Lost Tapes episode. If you enjoy creepypastas or scary stories told through the lens of someone else's final moments, buckle up and enjoy the ride. Noah's lost tape was discovered 3 miles west from Bamberg, Germany, a small city 20 miles north from Munich. A search and rescue team found the shredded remains of a shirt pocket, parts of his clothing, and a DNA analysis confirmed that the victim in question was the aforementioned Noah Weber. His wife of 23 years, Alexis Weber, reported him missing when he didn't return from his evening stroll. Noah, he was a family man, had 4 kids, was an accountant for 17 years, and in 2013, he wanted to escape from it all. The old grind was becoming too much, and he just needed a break. Bamberg, Germany, a sleepy town in the middle of nowhere without anything to do, it was a perfect spot for him and his wife to escape to for a few days in June. Their vacation was going well until the night of June 15th rolled around, and Noah didn't return to the cabin they rented. He liked walking in the woods, not too far off, just far enough to get away from it all, and while appreciating nature, he often smoked a cigarette. Around 9:13 p.m., Noah left the small cottage, and a few moments later, Alexis heard a terrifying scream from the forest. It sounded like her husband. Let's play the lost tape and hear what happened. I ran away as fast as I could, but I couldn't outrun the snarling beast. I screamed, hoping that somebody could hear me, but I don't think anyone did. Its stare bored into me as it stalked me in the forest. Though it could clearly see me, it skulked behind, often hiding in bushes or behind a tree. It's watching and waiting. But why? As I ran through the forest, it panted like a dog or a wolf, but I'm not sure. Sorry, forgive me. Allow me to begin this from the beginning. My name is Noah, and I like to have a good smoke while I'm out in the woods. That's part of the reason why I go walking so much. But don't worry, I don't start forest fires by throwing out a burning cigarette, but let's be honest, I do enjoy some good tobacco. Anyway, my wife and I, we were out here trying to squeeze a quick vacation in before we went back home for our daughter's graduation. She attended USC, University of South Carolina, the very same school I earned my degree from years back, and we had this huge party planned for her. Everyone is going to be there, but considering what's happening right now, being lost in the woods and whatnot, I don't know if I'll make it. I carry around this tape recorder just to record my thoughts because it's easier to do that than to sit down and write them in a diary. So far, this vacation has been a peaceful escape from the rut we found ourselves in. A trip to Germany, whether it be because of this midlife crisis or just boredom, either way it was cheaper than buying a new sports car. I guess that's what people do when they reach this age. So that's a win. But for right now, I am recording this because I know that I'm not alone in these woods. The air is crisp and the trees are full with leaves. As I stand still, there's a sort of eerie silence. Crickets, cicadas, frogs, or toads, none of them are making a sound. Silence. I know that when the forest is quiet, it's usually because of a predator. Either way, I tried to retrace my footsteps back to the cabin, but was unsuccessful. Where the cabin should have been was just clear and open forest. There was nothing there, nothing. I removed my phone from my pocket and the service was gone. I tried to call my wife, but no, it didn't work. Just like in those cliched movies I watch. As I walked through the forest, I heard the creature lurking behind me, Often it slunk into a bush or skittered behind a tree. I don't know what's happening, only that it's following me. But then I saw something far away, perhaps no more than a football field. I saw a village. The buildings were small and of Roman architecture. There was a sign there too. It read, Ashemire, established in 1605. I don't know where I wandered to, but it felt like I was lost in another time period. I don't know if it was because of the way the people were dressed, or the way the homes were built, or the fact that there wasn't any modern streets or anything to indicate that this was a modern time period. I don't know. It just feels old. And then a pale creature, it crept out of the forest. I saw it come through the bushes. It skulked toward me on all fours as its red eyes arrested my gaze. Teeth, long and yellow, reflected the receding sunlight. I realized then, as this thing approached, that it was as tall as I was. And something about it seemed human. It reminded me of a pale-skinned wolf with a thin coat made of silver fur. Its muzzle, it was black, and slobber dripped from its immense canines. As I stood still, frozen in fear, the creature, it whispered, "Place yourself upon the altar." Ashemire, the town stated in Noah's Lost tape, became Alexis's obsession. She did little else than search for newspapers, maps, landmarks, or anything that would indicate the town actually existed. No matter how deep she dug, the location of Ashemire eluded her. Once she abandoned the search for Ashemire, she researched the historical records made in 1605 and found that in Ashemire's place was a blank spot, obviously erased. Alexis wrote an article and published it on her blog. It read, "Ashemire has been scrubbed from Germany's National Registry. There's just an empty slot where Ashemire should have been. I say that because I can see the erase marks and the indents on the paper which suggest that Ashemire was once a town. But why was it erased from history? Where's my husband in this place? And how in the world did he get there?" Place yourself upon the altar. That's what the beast muttered to me. I stood still for a moment as it approached. The aroma of burning leaves wafted over me, as did a warm gale. Suddenly, I turned and dashed away from the creature. As I ran through the forest toward Ashemire, the creature trampled the leaves and brush in its deadly pursuit. I turned left and then right, desperate to evade the beast, but did so in vain. It pounced upon my back, and I felt its mouth wrap around my neck. I closed my eyes and accepted that this would be my fate, but no, the beast howled as it stepped away from me. It whined as though it was in pain. I turned around and looked, and smoke, it billowed from its mouth as it yacked upon the forest floor. My neck, though I had not been injured, it felt hot. Where the werewolf had bitten, I felt 2 small scratches, and they both burned. As it stammered about, the werewolf whined incoherently about an altar and a sacrifice, trying to extinguish an invisible fire in its mouth. As I backed away from the whining beast, a shrill voice pierced the forest. A woman, perhaps in her 30s, screamed and pointed in our direction. Something was said in German. 2 men dressed in garb that belonged in the 1600s flanked each side of her. The man on her left raised a musket and fired in my direction, though I do not think he was aiming at me. The bullet tore through the air and whizzed into the beast's left thigh. The werewolf howled as it scurried off into the forest, leaving behind a crimson trail for the 2 men to follow. They did just that and walked past me without uttering a single word. While I stood there in the forest, unsure of what to do or what to say, The woman who initially screamed flocked to my side. I tried to understand her as she rambled in German. I said my name, Noah Weber. The only word she seemed to understand was my last name, because after I said it a few times, she took me by the wrist and walked me toward Ashemire. As I approached the town, I noticed a lot of townsfolk were emaciated, starving. Their bodies seemed skeletal by nature, and their faces were thin, void of fat, causing their eyes to slightly bulge from their skulls. I stood still while they studied me. They moved in an odd fashion, somewhat whimsical, yet were skittish like an abused dog. I uttered my last name once again, and one woman in particular, who wore a tan shirt and had raggedy blonde hair, shirked away from me, as though I had barked like a rabid animal. These people, they do not know English and have obviously never heard it. I feel that I had somehow wandered through time and stumbled upon a lost pocket of history. These people are not modern folk dressed up in costume. No, these people, they're real. Suddenly, I felt another jerk on my wrist. The woman who had been leading me through the town brought me to a small hut made of sticks, tree debris, and mud. I glanced at the other homes. Many of them were well built, while just as many were poorly constructed. And then there were these huts. I can only assume there are three classes here: the rich, the middle class, and the poor, which occupy these stick and mud huts. The woman tugged me forward by the wrist and guided me into one. Once it became evident that I didn't have much choice in the matter, I stooped my head low and noticed a small table seated upon a dirt floor. At the table sat a woman of somewhat muscular build and appeared to be in her early 30s. She spoke in a heavy British accent as she said, "Sit, Weber, sit. There is but one family here by the name of Weber, and it is that family which hunts these wolves." Lingtard hunts the wolves? I said, No. Where am I, and how do I get back to my hotel? The woman clasped her hands together and looked down at the table. She whispered, "I am what one could call an oracle. I have foreseen this prophecy. A man will descend upon the town of Ashemire from a time unknown and will be sacrificed at the altar of the moon on the next full moon. In doing so, Weber, you will release the right family from the curse you placed upon them, lest they remain trapped in the form of a werewolf. Should they remain trapped, their hunt will never end, for they can never feed." I stepped back. This is just a bunch of woo-woo nonsense. Curses, altars, hunts. It doesn't make any sense at all. I said, "I don't know what you're on about, but it sounds ridiculous. I just want to get back to my hotel, that's all." The nut job, the oracle, drew a hard stare as she said, "The witch trials are coming. Whether Ashemire lives on through history depends on your sacrifice." She wrapped her fingers around my wrist and squeezed it tight. She hissed, "The right family is a family of wolves. They reveal themselves every full moon, and they will hunt all of us endlessly until you lift the curse. Place yourself upon the altar and allow them to feed so that we will be freed from this curse. Noah Weber, do you not understand that is your purpose? That is why you are here." German authorities declined to confirm or deny the existence of Ashemire and alluded to the possibility that Alexis Weber was no more than a woman grieving the loss of her husband, and in her stricken moment of grief, she drew connections where none exist, and assumed a common clerical error in the German National Registry was evidence of the erasure of Ashemire in German history. Alexis published a follow-up article on her blog, which read, these people, I did some digging, some deep digging into the town of Ashemire, and I found out that it was once a village, a small one, obviously. It was scrubbed from history because it became a hotbed for witchcraft. The witch trials, which occurred in the late fall of 1605, revealed the hideous sacrifices made to appease the gods they worshipped, and that's why it was erased. Those cultists, because Ashemire was a town of cultists, they put men, women, animals, and even children on the altar. That's why they were erased from history. But even still, where is my husband in all of this? And why isn't Germany doing more to find him? How is he even involved in any of this nonsense? As the weeks passed, Alexis published 3 more blog posts and failed to make any real progress with her husband's search. Rather, she had attracted the attention of online trolls who assimilated her missing husband with Bigfoot. One night, however, something changed. She published a blog post titled, "My husband vanished from my family photos. Someone please help me." And a map from Germany arrived in the mail. Who it came from, no one knew, but on the map was Ashemire. I left that dingbat in the mud hut, but the woman who led me here, she stared at me. Her eyes did not shift as she watched me walk away from the hut. I'm not sure what she wants, but I found it odd that the oracle was the only person who spoke English. The woman grabbed me by the wrist once more and attempted to drag me toward the center of town, but I resisted. I pulled my hand away from hers and looked in the direction she was pulling me. A stone column, about chest height and stained red, stood at the center of town. At the base of the column was a shallow moat, and in it was dried, I think it was dried blood. I closed my eyes. That's the altar. The stone column itself was perhaps large enough to fit my whole back, but not much else. I stood idle as another woman on the other side of town approached it, and behind her was a small child. I think she was 10. The child was pale in color, and her cheekbones, they were pronounced. My stomach sank because she looked emaciated like the others, and her eyes bulged from her eye sockets. Her lips, they were too thin. The young girl heaved a sudden breath as she glanced at the altar. I turned away from the woman who had been trying to pull at my wrist and focused my attention on the spectacle before me. The child was led to the base of the altar, and the adult guiding her proceeded to lay the young child atop it, stomach facing the sky. The child's hands and arms were turned in such a way that her palms faced upward and her legs dangled carelessly. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes. As I stood, confused and silent, the woman who led the child approached the young girl's side. She spoke in German. What she said, I don't know. Suddenly, I felt a pull at my side. The oracle, or well, that's what she calls herself, seemed to translate what the woman at the altar was saying. The oracle said, "Those who have the hide of the wolf and spirit of the beast continue to hunt us. I make this offering of blood, bone, and spirit to the unholy specter which haunts this town. We beg to be released from this curse and pray that this offering will appease those who starve us, enslave us, and hunt us. We pray to the northern moon and the southern sun, to the eastern earth and the westward waters. I hereby light this candle and douse it with the essence of our offering." I stood because I didn't know what else to do. The air and trees were motionless, and the sounds of the forest diminished. I looked away when the woman withdrew the knife from her robe and covered my eyes and clenched my jaw as she approached the child on the altar. From the corner of my eyes, the pale-skinned werewolf emerged from the forest and it skulked toward the child. The oracle whispered, "The flesh of man burns its mouth. It drinks the fluids of its prey, lest it disintegrate entirely." July 13th, 2013, Alexis published what could be her last blog post. It said, Stop saying I'm crazy. I swear I had photos that had Noah in them. They were here, our wedding photos, vacations, and just random photos. You people are acting like I would have posed by myself in a wedding dress to prove a point. Look, something happened at Ashemire, and I don't know what. I found Ashemire on Google Maps. I don't know how it all of a sudden appeared, but it did. More confusing than that is that it has a history now that dates back hundreds of years. I don't understand. None of this stuff existed until a few days ago. People, Noah did something in the past that changed the present. You people, you have to believe me. You have to. Skeptics of Alexis's story claim that Alexis had suffered a psychotic break once she realized her husband, who they suggest was a figment of her imagination, disappeared. Online sleuths searched for anything that would prove Noah's existence, if only to exacerbate Alexis's suffering, because trolling is fun for people who don't have a life to tend to. But the disappearance of Noah Weber reached a boiling point when Alexis flew back to Germany and confronted the German authorities about her husband's disappearance. Once there, she learned of the horrific sacrifices, live burials, and onslaught of the Ashemire people, and how a select few uprooted all witchcraft in the area, which, unfortunately, led to Ashemire being set ablaze in 1607 and reborn as a Christian settlement. Alexis deduced that perhaps, in the timeline in which she came, Ashemire had been burned down entirely, erased, and forgotten. She knew Noah had done something to change the course of history, and in doing so, may have cost him his life. The sudden realization of her husband's demise set to fire the rage she had kept under control. One day, she took it upon herself to set Ashemire ablaze, with the hope of correcting a timeline she had felt was broken. In doing so, she was arrested and is currently being charged for arson. Locked in prison in Ashemire, Germany, she remains. Though she was aware of the consequences of her actions, for a mere moment, she truly believed she would affect the past in the same way Noah changed the present. After it was all said and done, the werewolf lapped up the blood. It whined as it did so, probably because it burned. I looked at the oracle as she stared forward. Her nose was hooked and sloped down. Eyebrows, thick and full with bushy hair, lifted as the werewolf turned toward me. I pushed the woman aside because I will not be their sacrifice. As she fell to the ground, she bellowed, "It was your blood which made this curse. It is your responsibility to lift it. We have summoned you here for no other reason." The werewolf slunk low to the ground in sorrow. Blood sprayed from the depth of its throat and through its teeth. I scanned the area for something I could use to strike the werewolf, but I found little. As I turned around and began to run, the townsfolk, they lurched forward, preparing to chase me. Their arms were thin and bony, as were their entire bodies. Though they looked different, all of them looked like flesh draped over a skeleton. They wore tan shirts, which were once white but had become stained with filth, and gray pants. Each of them, one by one, pointed at me and said something in German, probably something about not letting me run away. One man lifted a pitchfork and took aim at me, and by then I had forgotten about the werewolf which had started to close the distance. Only a few seconds ago it was perhaps 50 feet away, but now it was in a full sprint, 15, 12, 10 feet ahead of me. I pushed against the ground as hard as I could and ran as the pitchfork sailed past my ear. Whether it be because of dumb luck or instinct, I narrowly avoided the assailing pitchfork and plucked it from the ground. I pointed it at the werewolf and demanded it back off. Presently, I took a step back, away from Ashemire, but the people, they did not relent. Together they had amassed into a howling group, screeching in German tongue. Even still, I backed away from them, taking careful steps until the town nearly disappeared in the distance. However, the werewolf which stalked me, it did not. It will hunt me to the ends of the earth because of a curse my supposed ancestors placed on them. I said to the creature, if there is a shred of humanity in you, please give me the time and space to say goodbye to my family. The werewolf, it did not relent. Why would it? I thought of something then as the creature approached my footsteps. I slowed them and allowed the werewolf to close the distance. Once he was near enough for me to strike, I drove the pitchfork forward into the werewolf's side. My attempt to slaughter the beast, I believe, was in vain, because as the creature glared at me, it did not slow its stride. Even still, I ran as fast as I could. The creature, it limped, it cried, it cannot run. I turned around and glanced at the creature. Though it were as tall as I was, and a monster among beasts, it was still bound to the limitations of flesh. The pitchfork, it served its function and pierced the wolf's ribs, wounding it, rendering it handicapped. With this new breath of hope, I dashed into the forest, unaware of the direction in which I ran. All I know is that I ran away from Ashemire and away from the werewolf. But now, here I am now. I sit in a forest, lost, unsure of what has happened to me or where I've wandered to. Alexis, I make this tape for you. I don't know what's happening. I don't know how to get back. I imagine that if I perish here, I hope what is left of me returns to you, somehow, some way. I hope so. But I want to leave you with these words. I will search for my way out, but the creature is hunting me. If they ever catch me and make that sacrifice, I believe Ashemire will appear in the future. The reason I assume that is because it had been erased in our timeline. If that city appears, we've crossed the threshold of something we don't understand, and I may be dead. But that may only happen if they find me and catch me. Alexis, I love you, and I always will. Please, if you can, somehow save me, because I do not know how to escape. Skeptics from all over the world concluded that the lost tape in question was likely produced by Alexis and her friend. But they could not explain the sudden appearance of Ashemire, as they reiterated that Ashemire had always existed, therefore, of course it would appear on the map. One particular fact Alexis found curious was that Bamberg had disappeared from the map. A shred of Noah's shirt had been found, which contained his lost tape, and that the world seemed slightly different now than she could remember. A second DNA analysis concluded that the DNA found upon Noah's shirt did not belong to any individual, living or recently deceased, on file. Alexis, waiting her trial in Ashemire, Germany, wrote a letter to her mother, who then published it to her blog. It read, "That was Noah's blood. I hate to say this, but there was an overlap between the two timelines. There was a period of time when he existed, but also didn't, as if one timeline was fading into the other, and now he's been completely erased, just like Bamberg. No one has heard of that city, no one. It exists, and now I am advocating again for a city that people proclaim isn't real. I've already done that with Ashemire, and now I give up. Something happened. They found him, performed the ritual, and here we are now, in a different timeline. Maybe in heaven we'll meet again, but I don't know.